we also have this bank ID system, which basically encompasses everything that happens. But that sort of brings me to another or interesting topic, which is like a digital identity solution, and how we're able to do that, and why hardware wallets are important for that as well. I've listened a lot to Michael Saylor. I don't know if you're about to tell that I'm a big fan of him, but Michael Saylor talks a lot about, or at least when Elon Musk bought Twitter, he talks a lot about this Twitter orange check mark thing, where you basically deposit some Bitcoin and get the orange check mark. And that's sort of a way to fight off bots by actually requiring a deposit on it. I actually have another view on this, or in my opinion, a better way that it could be done. Well, the first problem is like, okay, let's say everyone is required to deposit like whatever, 50,000 sats or something to receive an orange check mark. Well, now it's like we're giving Twitter, or now X, all this money into their custody, and what are we getting in return? Just a check mark, right? So we're giving a bunch of money into them, and it's like we're basically just taking a bunch of money out of circulation, which is maybe not bad in the case of Bitcoin because the value goes up, but at the same time, there might be more productive ways to do it. So one very interesting way that I think is very potential, or has a lot of potential, is tying this digital identity not only to Bitcoin deposits, but more like Bitcoin ownership, right? So I don't need to give X or Twitter that money for them to store in order for them to verify that I'm a real person. I can basically use a hardware wallet as a method of this sort of authentication, this deposit.
Proof of keys thing that
exactly
did a couple of years back.
Exactly, pretty much like that. So you obviously generate and store your keys on the hardware wallets, except for the keys you want to store just completely offline, the savings account. But you generate and store the keys on your hardware wallets, and now you can basically use the keys on the hardware wallets, maybe even combined with like a specific key, a unique key for each hardware wallet, to sign a digital identity. So let's say I want to create a digital identity, let's say Samuel, right? I use my Bitcoin keys and a unique device key to sign that identity. And now anyone can verify that, okay, not only is this like proof of keys in the sense that I actually am the owner of a Bitcoin account, but it's also a type of deposit because I own a hardware wallet, right? So it's like, now I'm not just giving money to Twitter or X for them to just store so that I get a check mark, but I'm actually acquiring a product that is useful for me, that serves the same thing. Because what does the money deposit serve here? It serves as basically a cost of entry, in the sense that now you can't have a bunch of bots because the price of bots go up.
You're paying to yourself instead of paying to Twitter, basically. But
exactly.
What you are paying to Twitter, though, is with your information. You're paying the cost of giving them information about exactly how many Bitcoins you have on that specific address, right?
Well, technically, yes. And in that sense, you could also just do the device key. So what you can do is you give each device a unique key that you store in the secure elements. It's basically a random generated like device key, which basically all the hardware wallets have already. Like if, for example, when you update a hardware wallet, it basically checks the updates from the device key and checks that the update is legitimate. But you can use this device key to basically sign this identity. And in that way, you wouldn't have to even tie your Bitcoin address to it. You only tie the fact that you have a hardware wallet to the identity. So now it's like, okay, you can't have a swarm of bots, because if you want to create a bot, you have to get a hardware wallet, right? And another thing is like tying this to WorldCoin and iris scanning. You might want to have some sort of proof of humanness, but you might not want to give it to Sam Altman. So what you can achieve with a hardware wallet is like...
I wouldn't give it to any Sam.
This is actually pretty funny because it's like...
not Sam Bankman-Fried, not
exactly.
Uncle Sam.
Maybe not me either.
No, not even you, Sam.
Yes. Yeah. This actually,
Not Sam Harris. Like,
yeah, this brings me to a funny point because my Twitter handle is Sauhix. And that used to actually, I used to play League of Legends when I was really, really young. And that's like my gamer tag from League of Legends. So I'm Sam who plays League of Legends, which is maybe not the best or most convincing pitch at this point, but maybe it's like irony. The irony is great. But getting back to sort of the digital identity and how you can sort of achieve this uniqueness there. Like I said, you can tie it to the device key, and you can sign the identity with the device key. This basically creates a cost of entry, so that you can create bots. And how you can create the proof of humanness is a way that we do it is basically we use an under display fingerprint in the hardware wallet as a verifier. You can obviously use a passcode as well. You can forget the fingerprint if you want. But one option here is that if you use the fingerprints, obviously the fingerprint data, and in the future, we also want to incorporate facial recognition, which obviously all this you can opt out of by just having a passcode. But this can sort of serve as a proof of humanness. But instead of giving this biometric data to a third party like WorldCoin, you're basically just storing this biometric data on your own offline device.
I'd be much more comfortable with doing that than having it online.
Exactly. So now you can basically tie this to a proof of humanness system where you have a hardware wallet that has a unique key inside of the secure elements that's used to sign the digital identity. And in order to operate the digital identity, you need to unlock the hardware wallets with your biometrics. So in this way, you can basically achieve a system where the cost of entry for bots is high. So there's no reason or no point to create bots. And the second point is that if you really tie it to the biometrics that obviously you store in your device, there's not even a bot that can operate the system. So it's like a very good system, in my opinion, and it trumps the system where you just deposit money to a third party and the third party gives you the verification. Now you really don't know what the third party is going to do. Does it run away with the money? Does it spend the money to acquire more advertisers? What does it do with the money? Instead, here you're spending the money to get security and also have this security device function as a form of sort of cost of entry system.
Yeah. So the way I interpret this is that it's not really proof of identification at all. It's just proof of a certain cost attached, which is fine because identification is bullshit anyway. And the passport was a temporary political measure, like all temporary political measures, it's stuck. But I love these ideas. It's very interesting to think about Bitcoin security and also adjacent topics like identity and like how we stop spam and bots and stuff.
Yeah, so, and one more thing on the identity is you might not want it to be like a real identity where obviously like what is an identity even? It's like a name and number assigned to you by the government and stored centrally with the government. But in a more deeper sense, an identity is it's an identifier, right? So in the digital space, I'd like to have an identity that only I control, that is correspondent to a key or a piece of information that only I hold. But I don't want it to be in a central database. I don't want it to be sort of an ID. When I say identification, what do you think about? I want it to be an identifier online. I want it to be my identifier online. I want it to correspond to a name I've given myself online and maybe even an avatar I've given myself online. And that's sort of held by me. That's owned by me. Right. That's sort of what I mean by digital identity.
Yeah. This reminds me of a story I heard at Bitcoin Amsterdam last year. There's a Dutch guy who told me about this village in Holland where the local government did a population count. And on the form you filled out when the population count was done, you could write down your religion. It was voluntary, but most people did. And so it's like Christian or Jewish or atheist or whatever. And all the Dutch cities did this thing. And it was stored in like a big warehouse or a government building of some kind in that little village. But then the Nazis came, and they had a perfectly good register of who was Jewish or not in these honeypot places. But this particular town, a local guy burned down that house and all the information with it. And they had like 40% more Holocaust survivors there because of that, because they didn't have this centralized honeypot for the evil guy to take. And I think there's a lot to learn from that story.
Yeah, it's the same thing, really. Like identity and property is really tied together a lot because, as I said, like what is identity? It's just an identifier, right? So it's like, how do you want to be identified? Like, what is basically your call sign, right? I'm Samuel, you're Knut, you're Luke. It's like a call sign. So it's really not like required for a central entity, a central database to store all these call signs, because identities can really like vary. A very good example for this is, I think, like artists. I'm a big fan of rap, but you always have a lot of...
Everyone's flawed.
Yes. But this works with any type of artists. Well, not every single artist, but it's especially with rap artists, very common. They usually refer to their identity, and now I'm referring to your actual name and social security number and stuff, as government identity, right? Because that's the identity your government uses. But if I take someone like, let's say Jay-Z, for example, I don't even know what Jay-Z's real name is, right? It's like, I don't know what his government identity is, but the identity I know him as is Jay-Z. So which identity is more important for Jay-Z? Is it his actual government name or his identity?
I know that Dr. Dre is not a doctor, but still I know him as Dr. Dre.
Exactly.
And that Snoop Dogg is not actually a dog, but a human being.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes. So it's like identity in the sense that like government, like they refer to like government identity and your, I would say like actual real identity those are very different things. And when I'm referring to digital identity, I'm referring to the identity that you want to appear as online and the fact that you should be able to own that identity.
So what you're saying is that Marshall matters, but that Eminem is the real Slim Shady.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.